Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Conn Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. As you can see, I am joined by the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein, as we're going to discuss the Washington Commanders' first pick in the draft, corner Emmanuel Forbes with the 16th overall selection. Bram, your quick reaction here.
Has anyone talked to Fred Smoot? Is he popping champagne somewhere?
Oh, Smoot is ecstatic.
He loves nobody loves being right more than Smoot. Smoot's been talking about this guy. First, he went to Mississippi State. 2, he's been talking about this guy. 3, I think they have the same build. 4, I think this is probably the biggest day for him since he tried to herald Red Wolves as the new name of the team. So this is big night for Fred Smoot.
This is his redemption for not getting that. Well, what do you think of the pick, though? I first of all, I really like this kid, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. But what do you think?
So I'm a little, when Christian Gonzalez was on the board, I think I even tweeted Christian Gonzalez. The second it got to the Jets picking ahead of them, and clearly they're not taking a corner, I thought like that was the pick. Kind of seeing that the tackles that I assumed they'd be interested in were gone. That I thought that, that was the pick. So I'm a little bit surprised. That said, there were 2 things that I think this team really needed to address in the draft and in the offseason, and this would be impossible to get in the offseason: playmaking corner and offensive line. And those were the most logical directions they could go. And there were a couple of others, like, if Dalton Kincaid is there, and he was, would you go that way? Cyrus Torrence, you need, an interior offensive lineman. That was logical too. But those were the 2 hot spots, I think, from the get-go that we said corner or offensive line one way or the other, most likely tackle in the first round. So I'm not surprised that this is the direction that they went. And when you watch him, he doesn't look his build, and he's a playmaker. And, I think we've talked about this a lot, and I thought about this a lot, in the offseason. What could change their defense from being really good to great is if they had a guy who flipped the field. And that's they have a lot of very good players in the secondary, but nobody that was doing that. And maybe this guy will be that for them.
Well, that's what he does. And I think the other key here is behind this defensive line, they have the ability to make plays with their secondary if you can hold up in coverage and if you have the instincts that he has. That's a big key because they obviously have a really good defensive front. So that helps. Now, I will say, and there are a couple of things, their top 4 tackles were gone. So you weren't going to go in that direction. And I know they like guys like, Matthew Bergeron and then Anton Harrison. They weren't going to go at 16. And Osiris Torrance, to me, that was too high. And I would have had some concerns about him as a pass protector and how it would have taken him to develop. So I didn't. And then when you come down to Gonzalez versus Forbes, the one thing that I heard from them about Gonzalez during this process was they didn't like what they saw on tape versus Georgia. And that stuck with them. Did not have a good game at all against Georgia. Now, he had a really good year the rest of the year, but I heard that too. So I think that was a big deterrent for them. And it wasn't just that it was a bad game. It's he didn't show well in a lot of areas at the run game, the screen game, and cover whatever. So it was just, I think it gave them pause. And so when you're looking at to try and separate guys, stuff like that could make a difference. Whereas with this kid, he just made plays, and he made plays, as Rivera said in the press conference afterwards, in the SEC. And so I think that gave him some added weight as well. And no pun intended.
It's a total aside, but I never thought, even with all the slander this week, that CJ Stroud would fall very far because I watched him play Georgia of all people. Right. And that was the night where I went, that guy just made himself a lot of money.
Yes, it did.
Because no matter what you thought about him towards the end of the year, where Ohio State was kind of up and down and you could kind of parse out his play a little bit when it mattered most in the national semifinal, he was incredible. He was absolutely incredible. And I would argue, he could have been the number 1 pick tonight. So I'll hear them on all of that. We all kind of have our particulars about what they like, what they don't like. But I do think, just on the whole, there are 2 things I wanted this team to do and to address. And, you can't get both with one pick, but ball hawk corner was top of
Yeah.
the list along with really good, solid offensive line. And, let's see what happens here the rest of the draft. And let's see what happens second wave of free agency. I don't think they're done.
No.
We've talked about this a lot, and like there was just no way that they were going to fill everything they needed to do, but they did go after something tonight that was definitively missing. And maybe it's a missing piece for their defense because we have a lot of really unusual parts here now with the Chase Young decision, Montez Sweat on the end of a contract, Cam Curls on the end of his contract. Like they needed something, I think, that could kind of put them over the top as a defense. They've been very good. Can they be great? And, it's a lot to put on a rookie, but he brings a skill set that they did not have. I like Kendall Fuller. I like Benjamin St. Juice. These are not guys that are going to have a lot of interceptions in a season. They're not guys that have a propensity to get a bunch of pick sixes. This is someone who could be a playmaking defensive back, and it's been missing in their secondary. So hopefully he fills that void for them.
Well, and I think there's a couple of things too, going back to the offensive line. The other thing that I'd hear throughout this process was Andrew Wiley gives them options. So they didn't feel like they necessarily had to get a tackle or they have to get a guard because they had Wiley as kind of a wild card. If they got a tackle, they could put him to guard. If they get a guard, they can keep him at tackle. So it gives them some options going forward in this draft because the tackles to me there are still a couple of tackles left, at least as when we're taping this, that I think could interest them. But when the top four go, you're not going to force a pick just to get a guy because you have the right tackle. So now there are some guards that they like beyond the first round that you could go get if you want to go that direction. And so I think so just for people who wanted the tackle, that's part of the thinking. And again, you don't force it. And I think that was smart. And then there was also Will Levis, the quarterback, who was on the board there. They were never going to take him. That was never an option. And so clearly, if they want him, they would have taken him, but they weren't going to take him. I think the only guy they would have, I think if one of the top two quarterbacks had fallen to 16, maybe then you would consider it. That wasn't going to happen. So the other guys they weren't going to take. Just so in case people were wondering at that point. The other thing is, Bram, they said, Martin Mayhew said they didn't get any calls by anybody who wanted to move up. So they didn't have the option of trading back, which everybody would love to do. And I think they would like to have done it because there were still other guys there that they liked in addition to Forbes. So they could have gotten someone else. But the thing I like about Forbes, and when I had Fred Smoot on the podcast, and before Fred came on, I went and watched Forbes play because I know how much Smoot loved him. But he's really good. And the one thing, it's funny because his weight came up. We talked to him after he was drafted. His weight came up. I asked the question about the weight because it's an issue and you hear it, but I don't know that it didn't seem like it was an issue for this team. And I know in talking to them, it didn't seem like it bothered him that much, this team, when they're talking about him. But one thing that Forbes said, and I like this, I'm going to paraphrase here. He said, they weren't worried about my weight because I can play ball. And that's true. So the one thing that both Mayhew and Rivera said afterwards is they felt his confidence when he came in during the top 30 visit. They felt his confidence, and it's comments like that. Like they even felt like he had a kind of a chip on his shoulder because of the weight, because everybody's going to bring it up. But as they said, he played in the SEC. He was durable, and he played for his size. He played physical. But the other thing, and I'll say the last thing on this, or two more things on he's very fast. He's a 4.35 a guy, I think it is, but he's also got length. So that gives you, so with the length, with the speed, it allows you to play catch up even better. If you get beat, it gives you that little, maybe a tenth of a second more to your 40 time because you do have that length that helps recovery and all that. And then the thing I love about him as a ball hawk is that one, he played receiver in high school. So he's got a receiver background. So he knows he can catch the ball. But I think as a defensive back, he understands routes and route combinations. That's why they like him in this zone match coverage system that they have. But it also enables him to play, like one of the things I talked to them about before this draft, before tonight, was the ability to see you in zone. You've got to see through your man to the quarterback, and he does that well. And I think there were routes that he could jump because of that, because he saw the play well, he sees the routes, he sees the quarterback. So his eyes in the right place. I think that gives him an advantage. And I think those are things that were attractive to him. So, or to them.
Yeah, I think like the weight is an issue to me. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. I also said this about Jahan Dotson last year. I'm like his height. is the one thing that I look at and I go, okay, listen, like this is a different level. There are some things that can be taken advantage of, your height or your weight. Like that can be a problem. Like he's not a linebacker. It's not an undersized linebacker. It's not an undersized lineman. It's not something like that. And he shouldn't be in a million car wrecks. But he is going to be taking on larger receivers in general. And so let's just see how that plays out. But, listen, I'm with you. Like, it's not like he was getting hurt. He wasn't, like he is playing in the best league in college football against a number of players that are in the NFL with him. So the game's not too big for him. The speed of the game isn't too big, obviously not too big for him. But like, I think like someone asked, I heard during the press conference, somebody asked something to the effect of like, would you like to see him put on some weight? And their answer was he's still a young man and he's growing and maybe he'll continue to grow into his body. And, until it becomes a liability, it's not, but I don't think we should dismiss it. And I think it's one of the reasons why he wasn't the first corner taken off the board.
He's got
He
skills.
broke a record for pick sixes.
He's got
in the
skills.
SEC, and he wasn't the first corner taken off the board. So that's the knock. Like that's the knock.
Yeah. And he doesn't have to gain a lot because you don't want to gain too much because then I think you start to take away from who you are as a player. But I do think you're going to want to bulk up a little bit because you're going to have to play the run a little bit differently in the NFL than you had to do so in college. And so that will be something that he has to pay attention to. The other thing I thought was interesting, Bram, and I think people were wondering about like Joey Porter Jr. Again, that was not going to happen. And I said this, you and I talked about this.
I hadn't heard that they were interested in him. If it wasn't, once Christian Gonzalez was there, I thought they would take him. And if it wasn't going to be him, I would have thought it was Deonte Banks. So
right, it wasn't going to be Porter because they didn't. The knock on Porter was could he transition? Could he be effective in the zone match? And there were some other things too that I didn't. And I've been told at one point that he certainly wasn't at the top of the list, like him, but would be a better fit for somebody else. And then Deonte Banks, I thought there was a lot about his profile that fit, but they kept going back to ball hawk, game changer. That's what they wanted, and that's not what Banks did for Maryland. Banks was physical, a very good corner, loved the competitiveness, and he showed, but he didn't get the ball, and he wasn't good with the ball in the air when he had to turn and find it. Whereas Forbes is excellent with that. So I think that was a big separator there. So, and you're a Maryland guy, you saw Banks, but I like Banks a lot because when I saw him,
he got a lot. I watched a lot of them last year. He got a lot better from the previous year to this year. Like it changed a lot. Like he wasn't even really on a radar. And I see a lot of Maryland football. And then so he improved significantly and obviously, deserves what he got. And I wish him the best of luck, with where he's going. I just think largely like the message here is, and this falls, exactly where I thought they needed to fix. And it wasn't just find a corner, it was find somebody who can make plays.
Right.
Like they just didn't have a lot of turnovers. Like there were two things that happened last year that were
9 interceptions.
Yeah. Like, their corners don't get picks, or not a lot of them. They're good corners, but they don't get picks, so they don't change the game. And offense wasn't scoring any points. And the two areas you could point to and say, well, if we're going to change that, it's fix the offensive line and get a corner that might flip a field. And they've, I think they've somewhat started to address the offensive line. I hear them on this, the signing of Wiley and Gates gave them options at 16. Don't think they're done there. And
no, I don't think they are
honest,
at all.
They would admit that. Be honest here. Like they're not done. I don't think they're done there. And that's why we focus so much on tackle in the first round, because I think we know, even if it would have been weird to select one in the first round, because you're going to slate in a tackle at the starter after you signed Wiley and have Leno, that doesn't totally jibe and make a tremendous amount of sense. This guy slots in as a starter immediately. They'll figure out what to do with Fuller and St. Juste from there. And I think right at this juncture, to me, I'm not really sure which way they would go. St. Juste, if you recall, was in the slot in the spring into the summer. William Jackson was supposed to start on the outside. That went haywire early. They moved St. Juste back. I actually thought that was an underrated, amazing storyline that he just went back over there and actually excelled at the position, albeit with not a lot of turnovers, but excelled at the position. That was a tough circumstance that they threw him in to do that. Are they going to ask him to do it again, or were they so happy with how he performed on the outside Do they ask Kendall to go back into the slot? I guess we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Right. And the one thing Fuller has experience in there, and then what they liked about St. Juste in there was a short area quickness and the length inside. So that was so either one of them they can feel they can do it. The other thing to keep in mind, Fuller's a free agent after this season. So they don't have very good depth at corner. So this gives them certainly another really good option. What would you like to see him?
Sorry to interrupt you. He's actually been a candidate to me to extend and rejigger his contract. I mean, frankly,
and I don't
know.
The only thing I'll say with that, I think there's a feeling like, well, maybe because as a back, I think if he can be a third corner and maybe be inside then, and that I could see that. And, but I think his days as a starter may end after this year. So that's the only thing I'd wonder about. And if you're going to extend him, I think you're going to want to make sure this guy can, but Bram, he's only 28. It feels like we're talking about, sometimes I think he's like 32 years old. He's 28. He's only
there are a few people on this team.
He's a really good zone corner because he's smart.
Right. I mean, the restructuring of contracts on a few very select people, Logan Thomas, Chase Roulier, Kendall Fuller, haven't happened yet. And I'm actually semi-surprised by that. It would offer them some cap flexibility if they're looking for it. With Roulier, it's a different story because, I mean, I'd have to hear more about why they haven't either restructured with him or released them. Like, I'm kind of waiting to hear what the situation is. With Logan Thomas, they probably were waiting to get through the draft to make some decisions about what they want to do there. But with Kendall Fuller, he is a candidate to me. If you look at his deal and you go, all right, if he's willing to work with you and wants to stay and recognizes that he's not going to get top tier money on the open market, maybe he'd be open to something like that. And so I don't know.
I think with Logan, at one point I heard the plan would be they would be more apt to look at him to do something like that during training camp or after, when they see where he's at with his game. And they see where he's at as a blocker. Is he getting back to where he was? And now this is assuming they don't take anybody in the draft and they would make a move.
Right.
Short of that, the plan had been like get to there and maybe at that point you extend them and then lower the cap hit and extend that way. So, but they have some things they can do with deals between now and later because they don't have a lot of cap room. So that is an issue moving forward to sign the rookies.
So you open Google Chrome on your phone, you're hunting for a super rare first edition vinyl of a band you're obsessed with when you're supposed to be working. But this site you tapped on seems pretty shady. And Daryl from IT just jumped up from his desk. Oh no, he's coming your way. It's a good thing built-in malware protection keeps you safe and sound. Not from Daryl, though. Sorry. There's no place like Chrome. Download Google Chrome on your phone.
Did you know the largest ropes course and zipline park in the country is right here in the DMV? Located in the heart of Montgomery County, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring combines climbing and ziplining to create an aerial obstacle course unlike any other. With challenges anywhere from 10 to 75 feet in the air, there is something for all skill levels. Looking for some family time or the perfect date night before football season starts? You can even climb and zip line under the stars. Would you rather keep your feet on the ground? Give axe throwing a try. With their projector systems, you can throw at traditional targets, play tic-tac-toe, Connect Four, or even hunt zombies. Listeners of this show can get $5 off any ticket by entering the code KEIM23DC at checkout. That's KEIM, K-E-I-M 23DC. So there you have it, folks. Climbing, ziplining, axes, food, and bonfires right in your backyard. The weather is warming up, so it's the perfect time to head outside and join the adventure at www.theadventurepark.com. That's www.theadventurepark.com and enter promo code KEIM23DC. So what do you want to see? You got day 2, rounds 2 and 3. They got 2 pick. They have 1 pick in each round. Where would you like to see them go?
So, listen, like I was kind of advocating for Dalton Kincaid for a while that I'm like, that's a pretty good pick for them. He's obviously off the board now. but that is a very deep field, and there are going to be good options at tight end for them when they're picking.
Luke Musgrave.
And assuming there isn't a run that occurs at the beginning of the second round. So that's an interesting spot. Offensive line still remains. I mean, it's so obvious they need help there. If they're going to be able to get one of the top 3 best interior offensive linemen, which may happen now, it's hard to turn that down in the second round. And then considering, the predicament they've put themselves in with Sweat and Young, I think a good edge rusher, if the right one is sitting there, is also a viable option here early. So all of those really scream to me the best thing for them to do. Offensive line, I don't think, I haven't seen the end of the first round here, but I can't imagine Brian Branch makes it that far into the second round. If he does, that's another one that I think is a very viable option for them. But offensive line, potential at tight end, if you think you're getting a starter, and I think you can make a case for some of these guys, especially like Kincaid or Mayer or someone like it could be a starter. If you like them that much, I would look at that. And those are the spots I would, and edge rush, if the right guy just happens to be there for them because of the situation that they put themselves in.
And I'm going to get to that in 1 minute. We'll wrap on that, but I do my thing when I'm looking at the second rounds 2 and 3, still offensive line somewhere in there. Whether there are some tackles that they still like that are on the board. Matthew Bergeron, I think, is still out there, I believe. And yes, he is. I think he's a guy that I would watch in the second round because he's got some versatility, but I think he's a guy that they like. I think that would be one to watch. I think the other spots are safety would be one, but it's got to be a safety for what they want from the safety. It's someone who can play the Buffalo nickel. And I love Brian Branch, but I would worry about him wearing down in that Buffalo nickel role, just like they're concerned with Cam Curl being worn down in that role as well. But Branch is a player, and Branch can make plays. And so if you got a guy like that and you have he and Forbes back there, you suddenly have a defensive backfield that can make plays. So he's a guy that if they got him, even if he doesn't necessarily fit to a T that Buffalo nickel role, and I don't know, and I'm not sure, it kind of got mixed feelings from them about his role there, but I think he's listed 190 pounds. That's small for that role, but the guy can play. And so somebody made the comp to like Honey Badger, and I think that's a pretty good comp for him. He's a player, and he's really smart. So if you got him, that's great. But they want a guy for that Buffalo nickel role. Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M, I think he's a guy that could maybe fit that. It may be that there's a linebacker like Henley from Washington State. Could he play that role? Yeah. He's a bullet. But he'd probably be more the third round, I think. So you'd want a linebacker, Buffalo nickel sub, guy to pair with Curl. And maybe tight end, but I think those are the other ones would be the ones I'd look at it first. Now with Chase Young, so they obviously made the decision, and when Rivera was asked about it tonight, it was just basically a football decision. They want to take care of their own, and if Young goes out and has a really good year, it's a good problem for them to have. And I think they, listen, if Young has the kind of year they hope, they'll find a way to keep him around. But here's the other thing, and this is one thing that and I talked about this with Nikki Javala yesterday, so I don't want to go too much. People can listen to that, but I am curious to hear what your thoughts on all that was.
I'm only surprised. I didn't forecast them doing this because with Montez Sweat on an expiring contract as well, there's an asset management part of this that I thought they would just pick up the option because then they don't have to make a decision on both of them. And now they've put themselves in a position where they do. It is odd that they have the same agent. They are also very close, like they're friends and genuine. And so I think, will this be awkward now? I know we'll have to ask them if it is. I haven't heard about a attempt to extend Montez Sweat this year at this point. So if that's not going to happen, then we are playing a little bit of Game of Thrones right now with, these two defensive ends. And I have a hard time believing that, when Rivera says it, and he has proof of it. They paid Payne, they paid Allen, they paid McLaurin. He has proof of, we do pay our own when you perform well. I haven't seen them do two in the same offseason at the same position group. So, I don't know how this works out where both of them are here beyond this year, even if they both have great seasons. And they can prove me wrong if that's what it's going to be. On the other side of it, I hear them on this. He hasn't played very much in the last year and a half. Over the last 2 years, when he was healthy, which was the first half of his second year, and I don't know if I'd call it healthy the last few games that he played, but he was deemed ready to be able to play. He did not have a massive impact on the games. And if that's going to be the case, then you do not warrant giving somebody $17 million. So I will hear them on all of that. This is complicated because he is who he is. He's a star. He's from here. He's a second overall pick. And I think we saw it in the second half of his rookie year. And I think we can just, as much as we talk about Emmanuel Forbes' size, go look at him. He's built differently.
Yeah.
And he is someone that could, when he maximizes his potential, be a game-wrecking, game-changing force. And we're all hoping that that's what he is now. The last thing I think I would say about it is this, his career's on the line this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they've put it on the line because if he doesn't perform well this year, what makes him think some other team is going to give him a Nick Bosa contract? They're not.
Oh, no, they're
he
not.
will become a prove-it-to-me player for at least a period of time, if not the rest of his career. And if he has a couple of big years, he'll become a mercenary of some team that's looking forward to pay and hoping to get a flash in the pan with him for a season. So this is a humongous season for him, and that's why I thought that because Sweat's coming up at the same time, I didn't think they would kind of put them both to the test at the same time, but they have. So how do they think about that? And how are they going to think through if both of them perform well? I guess we'll get there when we get there.
Well, the other thing is, it would have been hard to keep them both, even if they picked up the option on Young. We're still talking $17.45 million. So, and Young Sweat's going to get a big deal. So it would have been difficult anyways. And to be honest, one thing, if you really wanted to kind of go down that road, if you want to keep them both, that you could franchise tag one and then you extend the other. And in that first year, the money is low. Because it's just like Deron Payne's money is low this year. It's $10 million this year in the cap. So you could actually help yourself in that way for the next year. Now, you may not be able to keep them both down the road, but it does buy you another year to keep them together. And that money is guaranteed next year. So if Young didn't go out there and play well, you're on the hook for over $17 million for a guy who wasn't playing very well. Now, if he goes and balls out, that's a great problem for them to have, because it means they probably have, if that guy plays to where we think he can, this defense is really, really good. Really, because then you have a game changer in the front, you have a game changer in the back with Forbes, potentially, and that's what you want. So you have a chance. So if he gives you that, they want that. And there was no thought of, they weren't going to trade him because nobody was calling them about a trade for him. They weren't going to give him up for a low round pick. They would have been foolish to give him up for anything but a first or second. And nobody was going to offer them that. They weren't calling these guys on him. So and you're not going to trade Montez Sweat because he's your best defensive end in a year where you have to win. So this isn't baseball where you trade stars ahead of time, a year ahead of time. This is a sport where you need these guys to win, and this is a coach staff that has to win. So you're going to keep them both. There was never any doubt on that. But the other problem here, Bram, is too, Cam Curl's going to be up, and so you have a couple guys coming up as well. So, and they have expressed a desire to extend Montez Sweat. Not to the level I didn't hear the chatter like I did with Terry McLaurin or anything like that, where you knew that would get done. It's more like there's a desire to do that. Where that's going to go, I don't know. And they'll bring up Deron Payne and his situation. And I know a lot of people, listen, I heard the same comments I'm hearing about these two right now is exactly what I heard about Deron Payne last year, which is, if you can't keep him, you should just trade him. Well, they kept him. They found, he played his ass off and they kept him. Now, again, they may not be able to keep both these guys, but if one of them only plays okay, you're not going to get stuck with a massive contract because you feel like you have to pay them, right? So that's the only thing there. So, and I think it can pay off if they both have a good year, then that's what this team wants. So, slight gamble, but again, Chase Young had not earned that 5th-year contract, that option. That's the problem here. He has not earned that. And that's where the real problem lies, is it wasn't a no-brainer to pick it up. It just wasn't.
The only last thing I would say about it is, I mean, just consider this. This is a weird year. Consider the circumstances. There are new owners coming in. Ron Rivera's on the record talking about what is obvious, which is he knows the team has to perform well, before he has to talk to a new ownership about staying in his position. And that's everybody, and so this is going to be, this is a show me year for everybody. There's nothing more motivating to the players than playing in a contract year. And look how many guys they have in contract years this year. Can he generate all of them performing at their best at the same time to make a case that things are really, truly going in the right direction? This is we're all in this together here a little bit. There's a lot of choices that are going to be made here. He knows that. And, it's in his best interest that these players are motivated and play as hard as they can on behalf of the team and him, and obviously themselves. So it's all narrowing into one spot where we're in weird circumstances, unusual year, another year of a lot of uncertainty. I know, on the outside, a lot of people are like, they think things are going to automatically stabilize once the new owner takes over. Well, not for the people in the building. Remember that part.
No,
not for the people in the building. For the people in the building, this is going to be a year of proving value to stay in their positions.
Correct.
And everybody knows that. And anybody who's ever been through any change of ownership in anything that they've been in before, and I've been in media a lot, knows there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty that comes with it. And sometimes you end up being, you stick around or they value you, and sometimes they don't. And oftentimes having motivating forces around you, helping you get to the goal of sticking around, can be beneficial. So there's a lot happening here, frankly. I mean, there really is.
Yeah.
But in the case, I agree with you. Did he not earn that 5th-year option? No, I would agree with you. I also, to be fair to him, that was a really bad injury that he.
I understand why.
Not a normal knee injury, so I want to be fair to him, and
but
not
that complicates it. That complicates it.
Should have been better at the end of last year. I really feel like hopefully he will be back to where he was come this fall.
That knee injury complicated the situation, but the other problem was he wasn't playing well before that knee injury, and that's what they were definitely aware of that.
Yeah, and so he also, and there's a lot more to it that we can talk about at a later date, because I know you just want to move on. And I get it, but there's a lot more to it. It's not just the injury. They want him more accountable at OTAs.
Correct.
There's a lot of things, that were going on here that were just.
They want him playing within the system and with these guys. And when we heard about maturity and whether selfish play, whatever. There was a lot that was going that way. I mean, let's be real. So,
and both sides have been kind of passive aggressive about each other.
Yes.
So hopefully for him, this should clarify everything. You better show up. You better really play really well. And you don't have to have 1 million sacks, but it's got to show up on film that you look like the number 2 overall pick that we thought you were going to be, not only whether for your future here, but for your future anywhere, frankly.
Yeah, no. And I listen, the guy is capable of it. I think he can do that. I think he can have a good year. He can make big plays. So this isn't about that. So we'll see, but we'll a lot of time to talk about that. And there you go now. But tomorrow night we got rounds 2 and 3. I'll be back after the draft to wrap up those rounds after we talk to Ron Rivera and Mark Mayhew again at the end of round 3. And you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have analysis after every pick. You can listen to Bram on the radio tomorrow, ESPN 630. And then I'll wrap up Saturday after the draft as well. So there you go, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Bram, thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you next time.